So hello and welcome. This is Peter Wrycza here, speaking to you from Bali, Indonesia, where I have a retreat center, the Nirata Center for Living Awareness. But more of that about a little bit later. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm a mixed background. My father was Polish and my mother half English and half Italian. So I consider myself very much a European. I was raised as a Roman Catholic as a child, and that was, if you like, the foundation of being stimulated to be interested in what in Bali is called not only the visible world, but the invisible world. I had the good fortune to spend a couple of weeks every summer in a little village where the Virgin Mary is supposed to have appeared 1,000 years ago to a certain Lady Rocheldis and instructed her to build a replica of the Holy House. So Walsingham, this place, became a center of pilgrimage during the Middle Ages until it was destroyed by Henry VIII in the 16th century. So my childhood was one in which I was exposed to interesting beliefs and fascinating ruins of times gone by. And I suppose all this are my conversations with the artist lady who invited me every year to some interests that combined interest in unusual phenomena, the spiritual history, and the evolution and development of consciousness. Many, many turning points in my childhood. But probably, to cut a rather long story short, an important moment was the encounter with transcendental meditation in 1970, a technique taught by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and which became, in a way, the focus of my growth and development for about 10 years. He invited me when I was working for him in Switzerland to write a book on art and consciousness, which became the basis for my PhD thesis. My doctoral work was on higher states of consciousness and literary creativity. And I was looking at the Maharishis and the Oriental model of consciousness as a way of understanding the work of great symbolist writers such as Marcel Proust, Stéphane Mallarmé, Paul Valéry, and the English writer Gerard Manley Hopkins. In the 1980s, I became interested in what you might call the cognitive approach to understanding the unfolding of consciousness. There was something that the Maharishi said that Deepak Chopra, who was working with him closely at the time, picked up, which was that we are, in a sense, all struggling with the mistake of the intellect, which in Sanskrit is called pragya parad. the mistake of the intellect is the challenge that we have being born in a human body to reconcile the fact that from one side there is one universe, one field of experience, and from another side we're in a world of multiplicity, complexity, differences, including between different parts of ourselves and from each other. So this work brought me, when I started to work professionally with a learning skills expert called Tony Buzan in the 1980s, looking at learning techniques, such as how to read faster and how to take notes with mind maps, how memory works, how to study, all the things that we need to succeed academically and to process the mountains of information that we have to deal with. All that complexity, Tony Buzan's methods were designed to help. But I was curious because it seemed that not everybody learned in the same way. And while I was teaching learning skills in Washington and New York State in the early 1980s, I encountered the brash new discipline of neurolinguistic programming. And this, with its focus on the study of the structure of subjective experience, took me in the direction of how does subjective experience work, not only in terms of higher states of consciousness, but in terms of our development in everyday life. The issue of the mistake of the intellect, developments in learning, the attempts of NLP to study the nature of inner experience. I developed my own method of helping people resolve the mistake of the intellect by connecting with deep patterns in themselves. I called this approach in those days open heart learning, and later on I called it repatterning. In the 1990s, I was very fortunate, just when the Soviet Union was opening up, to be invited with a team of trainers to teach NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, in the outskirts of Moscow to a group of about 180 people from all over the old Soviet Union. It was a fascinating and exciting time when the peoples of the different Soviet republics and Russia and the Eastern Bloc countries were all getting exposed to new ideas and in a ferment of creativity and change that led to rapid personal growth, new ways of learning, and very, very rapid maturing in the people that were forefront of this great wave of transformation. It was really fascinating to be connected with this process And with my colleague Jan Ardui at the time, we were curious about the way in which our background in personal development and neurolinguistic programming was really focused on individual development. And what we saw happening in the Soviet Union at that moment of transformation was fascinating developments on the level of collective consciousness. And this became the focus of our attempts to understand how we could have a unifying model that would look not only at personal change, but change in whole systems and societies. So my experiences of visiting Russia and Moscow during the mid-1990s and conversations that Jan and I had in Nizhny Novgorod, in France, in Bali, ripened into a model that we called the way of unfolding. And the way of unfolding is really the recognition that evolution is happening. It's happening in the world. It's happening in the cosmos. It's happening in society. It's happening in different communities. And it's happening in our lives. The way of unfolding, we saw in human life as happening through 3 or 4 major processes. And perhaps if I could refer to a couple of slides, we can illustrate this a little bit. So if I could just share my screen. So let's move this out of the way. In looking at the way of unfolding, my starting point was a little bit from the work that I'd done in the 1970s and 80s on studying consciousness. And I realized that I had a kind of mission to explore and share living awareness. So living awareness was the sense that, let me see, how do I move this? Yes. Living awareness is this realization that there is a silent source of presence, wordlessly living life within and through us, and present in all things. So this was something that I'd encountered in my studies in literature, in the writings of poets, artists, from every culture that I encountered around the world. The wise recognized that behind the surface field of thoughts and emotions, there was a deeper consciousness, a presence felt in ourselves, and as the poet Wordsworth put it, rolling through all things. So living awareness, in a way, is intimately connected with the way of unfolding. The way of unfolding, we said, is this process that in a single lotus flower is leading from a seed to a plant, to a flower, to the petals dropping, and the seeds forming the basis of a new cycle of life. So the way of unfolding represents this natural process of evolution and development over time in the cosmos, in nature, in our societies, and in our lives. So the process of unfolding, Jan and I found, is happening on three primary levels. Process of change, which could be inner change within ourselves when we change our minds, when we change our thought or our intention. Outer change when natural catastrophes happen, our parents move to another city, these very physical experiences of change. So inner and outer change, and then on a higher level, the learning that arises from that change as we try to make sense of what has happened to us in being born into this world, in the way that we're treated as children, but also the learning that arises from our experience and stimulates further change as we try and manage our lives. And then on a still broader frame, we have the process of growth as we integrate the broad impact of change and learning in our lives and develop as a whole person over time. So these three processes of change, learning, and growth are key to our unfolding. And in that process of unfolding, we gradually come to recognize that behind the whole process of unfolding is this silent, unifying level of consciousness that we call living awareness. And that the process of unfolding emerges from consciousness, leads us back eventually to consciousness as our source and center. So in creating a center for living awareness here in Bali, in which a lot of this model of the way of unfolding was developed, because it arose in conversations that connected both the East and the West. Found that there are four key spheres of unfolding in our lives. Unfolding through the mind and through cognition, through the body, through the heart and our finer feelings, and what we could call soul or spirit, the higher quality of essence of our being. And that by working with these four spheres of unfolding, they can help bring us into alignment and thus help us come closer to realizing in our own flow our relationship with the source and center that we have in living awareness. So there we can see on a simple mandala that was our attempt to, shall we say, create a map that connected the core philosophy of Bali with some of the important insights of the West. And these four elements of mind, body, spirit, and heart connected with our direction, our connection, our expression through the body, and our connection with what's inside ourselves, our soul or spirit. So, from this model, you have these 4 or 5 ways of resolving interferences, way of unfolding. the 5 ways to resolve interferences and awaken to living awareness through turning within, through energetic release in the body, through inquiry, through the mind, through relationship, while all the time realizing that ultimately there is no path, there is no way, because what we're seeking in terms of living awareness is already present in our consciousness. So ultimately, everything happens, as we say in the Christian traditions, through divine grace. That is to say, we can plan and we can have all sorts of intentions to develop ourselves, but ultimately it's all down to the hand that we've been dealt by Mother Nature. And realization, when it comes very directly as a shift in consciousness that is natural and automatic, like an apple falling from a tree. When the time is right, the apple falls. And the main thing we hope is that the apple will fall when we're not too much in the autumn of our life. So these 4 or 5 ways, turning within through meditation and reflection, working with deep assumptions about who and what we are, inquiry into the nature of the self, energetic release through relaxation and energetic practices such as my favorite of inner dance, the way of relationship, opening to others, to nature and spirit. So at Nirata, we practice living awareness meditation, and my work with repatterning evolved into conversations on the edge of silence, which connects awareness and energetic release, relationship in terms of what I call radical intimacy, the very, very subtle connection with another. Conversations on the edge of silence, which is something Sergey and I have talked about quite a lot, are thus an important element in enlivening living awareness, both in the conversation and through the various modalities that support unfolding. So we use conversations on the edge of silence, in radical intimacy, in inner dance, and they also help us to understand what is happening in meditation. So conversations on the edge of silence help enliven what's within us. They come from our ability to turn within through meditation, and they support inquiry, relationship, and energetic release. So there are 8 forms or variants of the conversations on the edge of silence that I offer here at Nirata and online. Inquiry into the non-dual living awareness, radical intimacy partnering, inner dance, supervision for professionals and leaders, coaches and therapists, repatterning, and work on the collective level with courteous groups. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of what I'm up to in my life and work. So here we are, and we will have an opportunity on a future date to spend an hour and a half, or a couple of hours developing some of these themes and exploring perhaps some of these facets of conversations on the edge of silence. I hope this has given you some insight and some background. Thank you very much. Have a lovely continuation to your program.